already 12 attendants, so we're getting ourselves locked in. Terrific. Here we are. All right, Rob. Well, welcome back. My name is good to see you here. My name is Brant Hanley, Managing Director of Resource Options International. We do retained executive search exclusively for the middle market, if you don't know that already. And it's wonderful to welcome you all back. We've got people coming into the room. And since we've had some technology problems in the past, I'd love for each of you as you enter, please to just drop me a note. Let me know that you can hear and see us okay. And we'll get underway with Rob straight away. So we've got a number of folks coming in. Let me just take a look at their names here. We've got Katie, Craig, Hap, Andy, Jeff, Kyle, Lee, Rich, Ron. If all of you could please just drop a note, let me know that you're in. I'm getting yeses. That's great. Make sure that we have good audio and video. Appreciate that. Just tell us that you can hear us and see us okay. And we'll get underway in a moment. Once again, Rob, it's great to have you back. Wonderful to be here with you and obviously taking a look at what we have to say in terms of building leadership teams for the middle market. This is a repeat performance because we've obviously had a little bit of a technology problem back in February. And Rob, we appreciate your willingness and obviously, interest to come back and talk to us. We've got a number of people coming in. It looks like technology-wise, we're getting the technology gods loving us today, so that's a good thing. For those of you that don't know Rob, he is an expert when it comes to middle market issues, written a book about the mighty middle market, does consulting as he's founder of the CEO to CEO consulting service and roundtable. Rob and I have known each other for a couple of years and had the opportunity to work with a couple of different clients over that time period. And I find him to be one of the most astute and knowledgeable folks in the middle market. And not just from a consulting standpoint, but Rob ran a middle market family business for a number of years. And I'm sure he'll touch on that today as we get into the presentation. Welcome, Ron. Welcome, Kim. Hap, glad to have you back. Jeff, thank you for letting us know. As new people come to the room, I see Elena, haven't heard from you. Jennifer, Rich, Terry, if you wouldn't mind just dropping us a line, we want to make sure everybody is connected properly. And by the way, if you are in a browser other than Chrome and you have Chrome installed, Chrome seems to be the preferred platform. So if you're having any problems at all, please don't hesitate to switch over to Chrome and get set up, and that will allow you, I think, to have the best connection. But so far, so good. I don't see any distress calls coming in, Rob. So we're off to a wonderful start. So once again, it's great to have you here. We're a few minutes in, and I think we're about ready to get started. We've got more people joining. I'm sure more will be coming in as we go. And I'm going to turn it over to you. I will be standing ready to put up the polls as they come in, because I know that you'll be asking for input from our attendees today. We've also got a number of questions, so please do leave time for the Q&A, Rob. We've got a lot of questions that came in beforehand, and we certainly have more, I'm sure, that will come in. So with that being said, Rob, I'm going to go mute, turn off my video, and turn it over to you.
Let's see. All of a sudden, I'm having a little trouble hearing you, Brant.
I went on mute, so it's all over to you.
Uh-oh, Brant. Hello, Brant?
Rob, you're loud and clear. You're all set to go. Yep.
I am. Okay, great.
Right,
then I'm going to...
you need to get that form.
All right, I'm going to jump right in here. I've got the right one sharing, so we get going. Oh, bear with me just for 1 second. Let's see. There, we'll get that going there, and off we go. So by way of, a little bit about me. I've got a couple of books under my belt. We're going to touch and focus on one as the jumping off point for what we do today. 23 years, a company called Bentley Publishing Group. We published Wall Decor, and we had all the scars and battles that all of us have, and experienced all the growth killers that I've been through. And CEO to CEO now, 9 years and running, mostly around mid-sized companies. So enough there. But I want to, just as we get started, get a quick poll here. If you'd pop that poll, Brant, so that we can get an idea of who's on the call. So again, go ahead and pop that, Brant, and let's see how people roll in. Just kind of what, who are you, CEO, and so on and so forth. There we go. Polls up. That's awesome. Just gives me a little bit of feedback as we jump in and start to talk about mid-sized companies. And while you guys are voting, I'll just kind of give you an idea of our focus here, right? And it's on mid-sized businesses, and broadly, I'll define that as 10 million to about $1 billion. That's a huge range, and there are certainly differences within that, but it's mid-sized. Employees maybe 20 to even 5,000, so a big range. But most of all, it's when businesses start to really get complicated, when it takes a team to lead things forward. It's beyond that startup stage. Let's go ahead and end that poll, Brant, and just keep rolling through this. And we're primarily CEOs in this call, which is awesome. So let's see. Let's try to get this thing advancing a little bit. There we go. All right. So mid-size, if you look at all the writing, there's all kinds of books on startups, and there's a lot of publicity around big companies, but that mid-size space can be really beautiful. Imagine a $40 million business putting out 10% free cash flow. That's $4 million a year. And mid-size can be beautiful for a lot of other reasons. Businesses for the first time really get momentum and really start rolling along. But it's only if they're mighty, if they're run well and running well. And so, again, what defines mid-size is the complexity and the need for team leadership. But I also want to touch on here is, what does it mean for a company to be mighty? Because when they're not mighty, they're painful, and it's about growth, some level of growth, not necessarily huge. It's about being able to take a licking and keep on ticking, as they used to say on the time watch commercials, or the Timex rather. And overall, they should be fun to lead if they're mighty. Maybe not every week, but over time, it's like, hey, we're moving the marketplace here. We're getting some things done. And of course, what's important is that the business is helping the owners achieve their objectives. The business isn't at odds with the owners. So those are some of the ideas around mighty, but it's useful and important to think about how you define your mid-sized business as being mighty, and what do you have to do differently to really get there. So the theme of this, is that really mid-sized companies are different. They're not just bigger startups or smaller giant companies. And that mid-sized companies get attacked, and this is the thesis of the book, by 7 silent growth killers. And we're only really going to focus on that bottom one, tolerating dysfunctional leaders today. And because mid-sized companies are different, they demand different leadership approaches. They demand some leadership processes that really don't have to exist when they're a startup. And so, that's how we're going to drive through this. And so often when we get into some, new clients, or we talk to businesses, the CEOs feel like this guy, right? Just working so hard, trying to lead by example, and they don't feel like their team is with them. Team's kind of along for the ride. Man, that is hard. It's exhausting. And what makes it worse is that they're competing with companies like this, where the team is pulling right alongside the leader, and they can't win. You can't win if you're that first guy struggling to pull your business on your own. With this company, you're going to lose. So let's dive into the evolution of a leadership team. How do they go from that first person to that second team kind of environment? So, this is a little org chart for a startup. And you know what? Small teams work really well. One guy tells other people what to do, and they respond. Now, of course, things are always moving and changing, and there's lots of communication. But it still works. Even when, bad things happen, there's a little shouting and screaming. But, by and large, that's the way small companies should work. Don't need a lot of, plans and process. It goes really well. And if it does go well, guess what? Pretty soon you have 7 helpers, 9 helpers, and pretty soon you have 13 helpers. Now, that's a lot of communication, and it's hard to keep up with it all. And I've been there. And, the CEO starts to overheat, like, I can't take all this, and I'm at 18 hours a day. And, People don't get the messages that they need. And then there's that big break, that big opportunity. This is the window of opportunity. And that CEO wants to get the money and go grab it, but they can't because they're tied back with trying to keep the business running. And it's really frustrating, And then when a bad thing happens, there's real shouting and screaming, and it starts to break apart. Some people won't stay in that environment. They're not effective. And it just feels terrible. And, I've been that guy's kind of feeling like I'm getting sucked into the vortex. I'm losing control of my business. I've spent too much time there. Understand it. That picture came truly right out of my imagination. So what do you do then? Well, you got to make some changes. You got to upgrade the team. And typically, companies at this size can't upgrade everybody, so they pick one or two. Maybe one person can step up and get there. Another person, maybe you got to bring in somebody new. But this is kind of exciting because all of a sudden, two leaders start talking to each other. They start figuring things out. It's also scary for the CEO who says, ooh, they're doing things without me. But the CEO starts to get a little bit more bandwidth. And this is where we need a little bit of structure. We need a little bit of a plan so that everybody's going in the same direction. And if we add enough plan and process along with those leaders, we start to gain some altitude. We get some more profit. We get some more, cash flow coming in because that team of leaders starts to pull the business forward more aggressively. I want to make a special point here, and then we'll get back to this animation. Our loyalty has to be upwards. The CEO has to say, I'm more loyal to the mission of the company than I am to my people. It kind of sounds strange. And you know what? The C-suite has to be more loyal to the CEO upward than they are to their own teams, because that's how we really keep alignment. If we're all loyal to the person or the plan above us, we're all aligned like a flock of geese, and guess what? We pursue the mission really effectively. On the other hand, if we're more loyal to the people that report to us, where our loyalty is downward, that's the definition of a silo. That's where dysfunction really starts. This is a hard, odd message, but it's absolutely true. And, a lot of our clients, a lot of CEOs, a lot of leaders and companies are like, why can't the team that helped me start this business succeed and get us all the way there? They're so frustrated. Well, here's why. First of all, small business is all about short-term survival, but mid-size needs that longer-term health perspective. And it takes a different kind of person who enjoys looking longer term, who enjoys knitting together something over months and maybe years rather than days and weeks. The other issue is that small businesses love generalists. They love the Swiss Army knife person who can do everything. And people who like to be the Swiss Army knife love small businesses. You get to midsize, you can't do all those different things. You got to specialize. Well, how do those people have a chance to even learn how to specialize at the pace small businesses and startups go at? And likewise, maybe they don't want to. Another element is the CEO is the only leader in a small business. Typically, they tell other people what to do. And those small businesses are full of people that like that. But at midsize, we need a team of leaders, someone who used to like clarity and direct orders from the boss, get that done, all of a sudden has to start figuring it out for themselves because the CEO can't tell them anymore. That's a different ride. Some people can't do it. Some people don't want to do it. And then lastly, in small business, you can react. You get these quick to fix problems, jump on it, bam, done. Feels great, adrenaline rush. But at mid-sized business, we need people that'll say, wow, I don't know how to solve this. This is going to take a year to fix this infrastructure system. And they know how to manage projects over long periods of time and enjoy it. 4 fundamental reasons why we can't always take everybody forward and why everybody doesn't want to shift from a small business to a mid-sized business. Okay? Really important to understand this. Now, I want to ask a question, and Brent, if you would pop a poll again here. What percentage of your leaders, now it could be you if you're in a smaller business, or it could be your leadership team under you, have a great team under them that they can really depend on to perform at a high level without micromanagement? Okay? Really important question there. And so, think about that. Do 80 to 100% have that? That would be awesome, right? Click that first option. If you're like, well, it's kind of dicey, you know, a couple do, but a couple don't. All right, then you're going to come in at that level and so on. And, you know, ugly is where you're like, geez, Louise, we don't have anyone that takes initiative and really has that team where teams pull things forward. So we're getting in some information here, which is awesome. And so we're running about 50-50 right now between good and dicey. And you know what? Good is good enough if you're running a steady business in a fairly safe environment. You know, growth is, you know, consistent. But wow, if you want to really explode off the blocks and grow fast, or you're in a really tough market, good sometimes isn't good enough. Dicey, you know, maybe that's why you have some years up, some years down. So, you know, where we've ended up here on the poll is about 17% are awesome. A third is good, a third is dicey, and about 17% bad. That doesn't surprise me. And this whole webinar isn't about just going from bad to good. There are companies that say, no, I want to go from good to awesome. And, you know, there's really important content in here as well. So let's wrap that poll up, Brant. Thank you for popping that. That was really interesting. So on with the animation here. So we've got, you know, the next progression is we had enough money and progress. All of a sudden we filled in with the whole leadership team. And isn't that awesome where they start working with each other? Now we need a lot better of a plan here to be really clear about who is doing what by when, so we can integrate and so that the CEO can feel safe that the team is doing what he or she intends, not what they want to do. What's awesome is that the CEO gets a sense of freedom. When the business is running without him or her daily involvement, they can move around and help where help is needed. They can go outside and grab new technology, knowing their business is in good hands. It's going to be running well. And the CEO now is doing mostly CEO work and not as much of that day to day. Now, this is a progression, of course, and not every one of you are in the same spot as this roll forwards. What happens next? Business gets up to maybe 75 million. All of a sudden, the C-suite can't have a bunch of helpers. They'll overheat. So they've got to upgrade their team and extend the tendrils of the plan down to the next level so that the CFO, COO's team of leaders knows what to do so that the C-level person can be freed up to do more strategic things, because that's what an organization at the $75, $100 million level, frankly, really needs. And of course, if that works well, we get a company that looks more like this, where we don't have to have like chains tying everyone together, chain of command, but we can all change and adapt as we need to, but go in a certain direction to get where we need. That's a mighty leadership team when you get that kind of flexibility, but we stay focused and drive where we need to drive, frankly. Okay. So we're going to jump into a leadership team assessment, and all of you got emailed to you or should have a workbook. And if you go to page 4 in that workbook, it's going to really help you if you actually put dots down. And if you don't, just grab a sheet of paper, right? Draw a square box and you'll get the idea here. Because the question is, where is our leadership team relative to this? So let me explain this first chart here. We're looking at A, the upper axis there. And the challenge I would issue to you is, in your industry, are your challenges getting more complex? The statement specifically is, our challenges are not getting more complex. If that's true, like, hey, we're in a steady business, we're distributing t-shirts or whatever that might be, then you'd give yourself a 10, that the challenge level is about the same as last year. Now, most people don't put a 10. If you're in some sort of a quickly evolving, high rivalry kind of industry and everyone's changing up all the time, you're going to give yourself a lower dot on that score. Because you know what? An awesome leadership team in a steady market may well not be an awesome team in a difficult market. Sometimes it's not our team that falls short. It's the market that gets really, really tough. So that's level A here. Let's go on to the second evaluative point, and that's leadership acumen. So that's on axis B over there on the right-hand side. And the statement is, the members of our leadership team are awesome leaders with strong, eager followership. So if that's a 10, right? I mean, boy, your leadership team is loved. People are happy to jump in there. Great. But if you're like, no, you know what? Some are just, you know, not very good in terms of getting people to come along, convincing, leading people, then give yourself a lower number. And that's a really important element. And and an important aspect to this whole piece. So 10 if, yeah, they're really strong leaders, 1 if they're not. And you can have technical experts who are awesome at the technology side or the technical side of what they do, but can't lead. I'm not talking about their actual acumen yet. But that's this third part, is experience. So the statement, our leaders are deep and strong in skills and experience that are highly relevant to our growth plan. So you get a 10 if you said, wow, I've got this team of 5 people who just ran a business just like ours up to 3 times our size, and they sold it, and they've all come to me now. And now we're going to do it again, totally experienced, got all the skills that we need. Wow, you get a 10. But if you're that company that everyone's come up from the inside, which is a beautiful thing, but if they've all developed from the inside and they don't have outside experience, they're having to figure it all out all the time. They don't know what they don't know. And that you would have to put a lower score on. There's increased risk when you get to mid-size, when there's bigger money at stake, and it takes longer to get things sorted in a business that's larger. If your leaders don't have already the skills and experience that's relevant, risk goes up. Leadership team will not be as effective. And then going on to the next slide, around long-term thinking. So the challenge statement is, our leaders have ample time to think long-term, strategize, and dodge problems before they appear. People normally chuckle at this point. I can't hear you chuckling, but yes, if that's the case. But if people are, reacting and things pop up and they never have the time to say, gee, what's going to happen in 6 months? What's going to happen if a competitor makes a certain move? Let's plan this thing out a little bit ahead of time. If that's not the case, then you're going to give a much lower score. Because how do we expect our leaders to really smooth the way and think ahead if they have no time to do it? Because we're a lean leadership team, which sounds good, but sometimes means we're just flat out not leading enough. So now, I've got my art background from Bentley Publishing Group. Now you got to get out there and draw and connect those 4 lines. And you can kind of see on the screen the way I've done that here in the example. And then calculate your effectiveness. And the formula's right there. Excuse me. And on the workbook, you've got a place where you can actually write it down. Most people don't get super high scores. There are plenty of 17% and 22%, and occasionally someone feels awesome at 50 or 60%. The point isn't on an absolute scale. The point is, given that rating, if I could improve my effectiveness score 5% or 10%, what area would I focus in of these 4, and how would I go about doing it? So this is about improvement. It's about understanding what might be hobbling your leadership team and then doing something about it. You're going to hear me talk a number of times today about next steps. What do we have to do? And this is one way to trigger those thoughts. So given what you've seen here, Brant, would you pop the next poll and let's answer those questions, right? So the first one that's going to come through is that when you look at that leadership effectiveness score, even if you haven't exactly calculated it, Brant, go ahead and pop that poll. I'm not seeing it come up on my end. Oh, there we are. Perfect. Great. Hey, you know what? We're in pretty good shape. We've got a pretty high score. I think the leadership team can make the lift. Or in the middle, I'm not so sure. There's some weak spots. And how are we really going to make this big step forward if I don't have a strong team all the way through and through? And the last one is like, oh man, we got a lot of work to go. So the way we're running on this poll response right now, 25%, oh, got another one in, 20%, in good shape. We've got the majority in that middle box, which is typical, 57% right now, and then about 14% on the bottom. And I apologize for making you nervous, but I'd much rather you, stare this in the face and drive forward. So let's go ahead and close that poll, if you would, Brant, and let's keep rolling. All right, let's see. So, okay. Let's see. Let's go here. Oh, there we go. All right. There's an exercise I'm going to ask you to do. This is also in the workbook, but we're not going to do it right now. one of the most powerful things that I would recommend is that you fill out this chart that is your current org chart. And we've all done an org chart at various times, but for this one, if you see that box on the left on the screen, put the name down, put their functional down, but what's the big challenge for the year ahead for that person? If it's a CFO, is it an ERP upgrade? And then how experienced are they anywhere? They could have been a CFO 3 times somewhere else. Is that no experience, 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years in that role, or 10 years for that matter? The second thing I want you to think about is if you had to give them a grade like school, A, B, C, D, F, what would it be? Just being honest. Don't show it to them. Just, how good are they doing? And then lastly, their tenure, years at your firm, because that makes them understand your situation, your people, and so on and so forth. So really, really important. And kind of fill that out so you really take stock of how strong your current team is, the stark truth. And then once that's done, I want you to go on to the next part of that workbook and say, okay, what should my org chart look like in the future? Maybe that's a year, 2 years. I often do it 3 years forward. And I say, okay, what annual revenue will I be at? If it's 5 times what I am now, it's like, wow, that's aggressive. All right, then let's know that. What growth rate should we be at in 3 years? Do we just want to grow fast for 3 years and then top off? Or do we want to keep growing? Well, maybe what's our head count likely to be? We have to get this idea of this vision of where we're headed. Will we have plentiful cash, high cash, or medium cash? Or are we just a cash-hungry monster and we're not going to have much cash? That's really important when you think about what org chart you can really build. And then locations is important. Lots of locations, trickier to manage than otherwise. And then lay out what your organizational structure should be. Don't put names in at the start. How many, do you need a middle management layer? Is this the point where you have to add that in? Where is that? Maybe where are the high head count areas? So you go through it really carefully. And then the hard part, and we take a lot of clients through this, is who on the team now really has a place there? And it's not someone who's currently getting a C. It's someone who's probably getting a very good grade, who has the experience to really see us there. And it doesn't mean you have to fire your old people. It just may mean that you need to bring in someone above them who brings that experience, who can really show you the way where they made their mistakes on the last company they worked for, and they're going to make fewer mistakes for you. Really important exercise that I really encourage everyone to do. All right. And then in your workbook, there's those next steps. So again, if you've got a couple ideas right now about what you should do, just from what we've done so far, write them down, put a priority down. One suggestion is, who are the top 2 leaders? Who are the bottom 2 leaders? What are we going to do about it? If you go through this whole hour with me and then you come out going, that was some good ideas, but you don't do anything, then we've both wasted the hour. So focus in on what that next step is. Sometimes it's hard to think of the whole finished goods, but if we just know what to do next, that's super powerful. So, I'm coming back and saying, which will your business be in? And of course, this is an extreme. But if you could move your company from wherever it is in this spectrum towards the guys on the right there, what could that be worth to you? Upgrade 1 or 2 of your leaders, stretch to pay the salary. You get someone in there that's taking you to school, that's teaching you things. Usually it's pretty huge. And if we focus on that, it helps motivate us to really do something and move it forward. So I want to broaden out a little bit. We talked about the team itself. But I want to talk briefly about this notion of the leadership environment. I ran a warehouse for 23 years, right? We had it. And you see that messy, ugly warehouse. That's one thing to work in that warehouse. But boy, if you work in a warehouse like that, orderly and put away, boy, what a difference. And you know what? As leaders, it's our job to create a leadership environment that looks more like that, a beautiful, pristine, clear, precise environment, than that messy, ugly one, right? And so some of those key elements, is there a crystal clear plan? Do people know who does what by when? Are we measuring performance appropriately so that, that's how every leader knows, everybody on our team knows whether we're winning or losing. If the measures aren't there, it gets really unclear. Do we reward the people who win and create discomfort for those who fail? We're typically better at rewarding the winners, although some of us like to reward everybody because we think we're being more fair, but that is not conducive to performance. And then for those who fail, it's hard. I know most of us are nice, but they have to feel uncomfortable. It can't be like, okay, shoulder shrug, you failed, let's try again. It's got to be, no, that's not okay. And what are we going to do differently? And then sometimes we have to define what is success very clearly. What are we trying to build? We're better about that. Most of us don't define failure. Like, what is not okay? If we go below that line, we all deserve to be fired. We all deserve to be taken to school, right? And outside, externally funded companies are much more clear about what failure is than privately held companies. But it's important for leaders and for everyone to both know where we should go towards, the direction for success, and the direction to stay away from this, because that means failure. So we have to be a real part to that. So I want to tell you a case study here as we go through the rest of the presentation. It's a wholesale food distributor. And, we got brought in. The CEO was tired, just wanted help fixing this thing up. About 18 million in revenues, steady sales growth, but kind of near break even. COO that had become the CEO about 5 years back. Essentially said, we don't fire people, and the top 3 leaders running it, including the now COO, had been there since 1985, right? They started when they were very young. Bright guy, but very introverted, right? And there was a leadership team there. They were kind of managers, but they were disengaged. They were just doing what they were told. And the CEO, what he said is, does it have to be like a game of whack-a-mole? I'm running over here. Hey, you get that done. You get that set up. Well, why didn't you do that? And just knocking each manager, nudging them to get something done. And it was really tiring. This was the stuff, right? It's the stuff that we all do. Got to promote somebody, you got to change the sales territories, you got to zero that credit line, stuff. But it wasn't happening. Months were slipping by. And so we came in and we said, you know what? We're going to outline for each of those leaders 5 things. What should accounting look like in a year or two? What's accounting's real purpose? I'm just picking on accounting, but for each, the warehouse guy and so on. KPIs, what are the measures of success? How are we going to make this warehouse run well? The operational strategies, the hows, and then chunks of work that had to be done, right? We've got to clean up the receiving area, that. And we literally wrote that up for each person and got everyone to agree to it. We showed it to everyone. And this is an example. So this is a portal that we like to use, much larger organization. Every one of those blue boxes is a 1-page plan for somebody. And you see there's the company there, and then there's general managers of regions underneath it, and then there's the leaders underneath that. It all cascades down from the top so that it's all really well aligned. And we did that for this wholesale food distributor, except they just had 7 plans. It was a simpler organization. And every single month, they had to come together and say, did we do it? Did I get there? Did I do what I planned to do? And make a presentation. It was a little bit of peer pressure, but there was also great clarity. And you know what? They liked it. So, I know what I'm supposed to do. I don't have to check in with the boss. And step by step, they got really engaged and they were figuring things out. Why is our inventory turns go down? And they dug into it and fixed some things. And you know what? Just from doing that, by the end of the year, profit jumped from just a smidgen above break even to 3.5%. That is massive. Sales didn't shift at all, but gosh, 3.5% profit on $18-20 million. Yeah, that adds up. That's enough to hire another leader. And they really made this transition, or at least the first step, from, the guy pulling everybody to a team. And one person on that team, it was great what they said. This, it used to feel like, boss, you had us all in the trunk and you were driving and we were just bouncing along and so on. But, this year, it really felt like we all got to sit in the car and we could see where we were going. And the CEO, to his credit, said, it's great to hear that. He says, in this coming year, I want you to all feel like you have a hand on the wheel. It was an awesome transition. So then the next year, what did they do? They hired a VP of sales who had real outside experience. The person leading sales, 35 years there, didn't have any outside experience. And this guy, all he did was diligently manage the sales team. Nobody got fired, nothing dramatic. He just took what he knew and had from a much larger organization and applied it. And by the end of that year, this team was at 18% growth from 7% and 6% net profit. I mean, this organization was coming alive and great people in it. They were excited. There was no negative Nellies and nasty stuff. They were jumping in there. And the CEO said, well, you know what? Now we're ready for some more strategic shifts. And they started looking at geography and expanding and jumping into another customer type. And at 18% growth and faster, they said, you know what? We got to hire a VP of operations, second executive with outside experience. They ended up with a 12 plan set as they reorganized things a little bit. And today they're running at 28% growth and eager to keep going. I mean, what an awesome company, awesome team that just really, really came alive. And so, you know, what we help put in is what I call a leadership operating system, right? And that's an illustration of it. I picture it like it's the steel beams that hold the company together to create some stability so that leaders can lead rather than run around playing that game of whack-a-mole. And it's the elements. It's not just the leadership team, but some other elements as well, planning and governance and communication that lets our companies be like this, right? There's always going to be change. There's always going to be surprises. But with that, we still stay in sync. It's like gravity that we create some gravity for our organization. And so, you know, again, we get back to this, like, which business will you lead? Is it more like the left? Like you're trying to hold the business together and pull it together? Or is it going to be more, you know, more focused and so on and so forth? And so, so I think we've gotten to the point where we can take some questions. I'm going to go ahead and kind of close the slideshow element. I'm going back into the web camera.
All right.
All right. You're there, Brent. Can you hear me?
Welcome back. I can hear you fine. I hope you can hear me as well.
You're smiling. That's fine. I can't quite hear you.
All right. Well, we do have a number
there, Brent.
Okay. We were probably just recalibrating here, but we do have a number of questions that have come in, Rob. And can you hear me now? And I'll share those with you as we go through, loud and clear. All right. Okay. We'll dive into the questions here as your sound gets.
So Brent, I can't actually hear you. I wonder if you give me some notes about people who ask questions. Should I just do that? Tackle that?
That sounds good. Go ahead and do that, Rob, and I'll go on mute. You've got the questions that have come in, and there's a couple more so go.
Brent, I'm watching the chat, and so I'm going to see anything that you put through there, and so that'll help. But what I'm going to do, I've got these notes here, and I'm going to just go through that. And if you want to reach out to me in any way, you just shoot that at me, and I'll of course correct that way. But otherwise, I think that'll be the best time for us to go through that path forward. Okay. All right. So, you know, I've gotten one question here on managing the performance of people that have multiple roles. So this question is around a GM, right? So a GM has a responsibility for a region typically, and some strategic things and maybe even some tactical things, but they also got to sell and they've got to get out there. It's really, frankly, not unlike a CEO. So how do you balance getting the day-to-day stuff done when you're managing a GM and that higher level stuff? And I guess the answer that I'd come through on that is that you don't do it ad hoc. You've got to get together with them and say, what do we really need to achieve in this region? And really lay out what are those strategic things that have to get tackled and how much time should go towards that, and then how much time has to go towards execution. And there has to be ongoing communication around that and a written down sort of bifurcation of effort. And then some measurements that tell us whether we're really going at it the right way. So I would expect some key performance indicators. And some of those could be around activities, what the GM does, how often, and so on, that that tells us whether or not they're spending enough time on the day-to-day. So meeting where we say, look, there was 2 strategic elements: sales to the big guys that had to be driven in your area, and we had to develop a new competency. And how are those going? And maybe that happens quarterly. So we kind of lay out this process and plan around it, and then we see how well we stick to that plan. You really have to make a big change then you do, but it's that ongoing communication there. So, so I'm looking at the chat here, and I've got one that talked about what should a 10-person startup do for growth to 15, 20, 30, 50 or more employees. Okay, and I'm going to assume that's a short time period that has to come through. Gosh, so a couple of things is that one is, do you have leaders that know how to manage people well? When you're at 10 people, you can have some scruffy people who do some odd things, and maybe you don't have to be a great manager and have performance reviews in place and some standards and some clarity. Woo, go up to 50 people, you can't manage dynamically. You just can't have enough lunches or calm people down in their offices enough. So do we have 1 or 2 people that are really good at that? At 50 people, if you're going to go up to 50 and hold, you might not need an HR person. But if that growth rate continues, HR people can be worth their weight in gold if they have enough strategic elements, if they know how to build some of those kinds of things. So, you know, you need more leadership to manage those kinds of people. So that's one thing. And I guess the second thing would be put in those processes earlier. How do we onboard people? Do we have a statement of our values? Have we really gone through that exercise about how we behave in here so that the culture is maintained and we're really clear about dictating that? Because when you go from 10 to 50, you're outnumbered 4 to 1. So if you don't outline that well and manage it, you'll end up with kind of a happenstance culture when you grow up that quickly. Let's see. Video. Rob, try turning off your video. Okay, I will try that. Video is off. There we go. You won't see my hand gestures, but hopefully that will work better. Thanks for that tip coming in there. Let's see. Do you feel you can create enough training in-house not to have to hire from the outside? Well, maybe. There's a couple of variants. One is, do you have the money and the time to devote to training and development? And do the people you're trying to develop have enough time to get developed? If you're growing slowly, if as a leader you've started early enough and you have people that are excited about developing, you might be able to do that. And that would frankly be awesome when you can. On the other hand, if you've had to be lean because you're self-funded, you don't have much money, everybody's working long days just trying to keep up, and you're growing quickly, you're never going to make it. And so, you know, in those cases, you may pick a small subset of people that are really talented, who are really engaged, and you may be able to drive much more aggressively in that sense. So other things you can do when it comes to training and development, you can in-source some, so you can create processes where people can develop. That can help, but it still takes the time of your team to get that accomplished and get that done. So I find in general, super high growth businesses, you're never going to be able to get enough talent from the inside. You're going to have to reach to the outside. But there's cost and that's expensive. So it's a balancing point either way. Let's see. I got a long piece from Brant. I'm just scrolling down to see if we've got some other questions that have come through here. Let's see. So I'm going to go on. I'll move this back up to the top, and I've got other interesting comments that came here. You know, one was how to remove less than ideal leaders from their leadership roles. So that's a very broad question. Here's what I found works best. And I'm assuming that this is a top leader or owner who, you know, has a heart and kind of struggles with that. And so if you just say, well, just fire them and replace them, most leaders don't just do that. Here's the path that I find works best. First, get really clear with that struggling leader about what you want. write it down. This is a good performance review. What are those goals? What are those objectives? Where have they fallen short? What do you really need from them? You have to be clear. Sometimes we don't dispense with a problematic leader because we feel like it's our fault. So let's be clear. And once we've done that, we have to have regular feedback. Maybe it's a monthly meeting. How are we doing? Good here, not there, need some help. Now that can be a little uncomfortable because if after a month after you've laid this out, they're still stumbling, it's not going to be like smiles and roses in that meeting. But you know what? It's our job as a leader to make them uncomfortable so that they change. Because when we're not uncomfortable, why change? And after 2 or 3 months of that, it's often clear to both parties that it ain't working. The numbers aren't there. They're not even doing the activities that you both agreed were really important. And then it's much easier to say, look, buddy, this is not working. I love you, man, but you know what? I need you over here in this role. You're awesome in these areas, and I'm going to bring somebody else in that is strong in these leadership areas or whatever areas that may not be working so well. That's kind of the process to try to work through. You have to give them a bit of a chance. By a bit of a chance, I mean 3 months, right? And then you have to make those changes. Otherwise, if you're being loyal to someone who's ineffective or can't get it done, you're being disloyal to the mission. You are hurting every other person that's in your company. You're hurting your customers. And we have to really take that to heart so that it toughens us up enough to do the hard stuff, which is making a leader uncomfortable and moving them on when they're frankly not effective. So I'm flipping here to the next page, going down some of these comments. Let's see how can a new executive best deal with a founder who sometimes does silly stuff? Happens all the time. So I'll say a couple of things. Founders sometimes can change, but it's only when they want to change. And they're never going to become perfect. They're never going to do exactly what you want them to do. The question is, can you make them 5% better, 10% better, or 5% less worse, however you want to call it? And you want to be straightforward with them. You want to think about how to get them to take that next step. Sometimes it's saying, look, they have strengths over there. I'm going to come in where they're not as strong and support them. And that's the attitude that you have to have. And if you can find enough areas where they adjust to allow them to do less silly stuff, and you feel satisfied and you feel like your talents are being well used, that's awesome. There are other times when founders are just going to be their founder selves and you're not going to be happy. And then you got to find another position. Because you know what? Founders, if they're the owner, there's a difference there. Venture capital owned founder-led companies are a different animal. It's their company. They get to build it the way they want. And if they want it to be dysfunctional and it won't grow and hit the heights, that's their choice. I often try to help them and get them further, but sometimes they just don't want to change. And if that's too frustrating, you're good enough to deserve to move to a new place that that you can really feel useful and happy and engaged and so on and so forth. So that's that one. Let's see. I see another one here. As the business grows, a CEO, might pay them a lot of money because they were in first. Let's see. So they can leave, but they also don't cut it to the level to be. So I'm going. Let me just read this. A great salesman. Okay. So pay is a funny thing. You can overpay someone so much that they won't leave despite the fact that they hate it and are being dysfunctional. That's not necessarily good. What as a CEO we need is to have people who are just what the business needs 2 or 3 years from now, because they're pulling that business forward. What they used to be, even if it's still very valuable, isn't why we should keep them around. And so it's a dichotomy in a sense, but it's important. I think the other thing that I think this question is coming from. And by the way, for everyone on this call, I'm happy to do a no cost, no obligation personal consultation. And so I'm doing my best on these questions as they come through. But if anyone wants to reach out and send out an email, and Brant will put out the information on that. You know, whether it's 90 minutes and we do a deep coaching session to really dig into something, or maybe it's just a quick 30-minute question, I'm happy to do it if you're on the call today. You just have to put your hand up and request it, and we'll get you on the calendar. And so if I'm missing the mark on some of these questions, please set that up and we can tackle. There's another shift that happens when you're small, and any sale is a good sale, and you just light fires under all your salespeople. That's awesome. But as you get to mid-size, you have to create some boundaries, some guardrails around those sales. And sometimes some of the awesome salespeople sold a lot, but were demanding and we're so happy to not have any rules or boundaries, become massive pain in the necks, and they start to destroy your tech side, right? Because they can't, you know, we can't say yes to everything. We can't do everything. And on the tech side, the engineering side, they're trying to build something sustainable and supportable. They want to say yes to people who won't pay, but we need the cash flow. And so there is a real path that you'll go through to say, hey, you know what? That person, kind of an asshole, but powerful in sales. But now that we're at 20 million, they are destroying the team so much and hurting us as an overall organization that they have outgrown their usefulness. And that's a hard gut check. But there are times when we have to make that decision and move that forward. And I'm not saying to do it recklessly, but the value of team and team play in mid-size is dramatically greater than when you were small. And so we shift that some. And you know what? That crazy salesperson may hate being mid-sized because they're like, it's bureaucratic, and they hate it. That's fine. Then they need to go somewhere else. And I realize that's difficult, but I got to tell you, I've sat with so many CEOs who say, oh, I can't fire that person. They're essential. They're the only one that knows the code. But you know what? I've never heard a CEO say, you know, I fired him too soon. It blew up my company. There's always a way around it. And if you want to keep growing, you got to make those kinds of hard decisions. So thank you for that question. I'm not mentioning the names of the people that asked the questions out of confidentiality. Let's see. You know, I'm avoiding micromanagement and delegating. You know what? Micromanaging is bad most of the time, but there's a process and there's a time for it. When we get a new leader or a new employee on, at the start of that, we have to be much closer to them, and we have to show them and work with them very closely and very diligently. But if they're supposed to be a manager over time, they should start to prove and build the trust in us, and we get to move away and they get to take care of things on their own. That's natural. That's a normal progression. What happens sometimes is they start doing it on their own and they start running amok and going wrong. That's a time when a boss does have to zoom in and potentially micromanage for a very short period of time. But if that doesn't solve the problem, if the person doesn't get retrained, understand what they need to understand, and we have to keep micromanaging, then it's time to replace that person. Because if you as a leader step down and micromanage and do the work under you, then you know what? You're not doing what you need to do, which is stepping up and taking the lower level task from your boss and unloading him or her so that they can move up and become more strategic. In a growing business, if you want to keep your level in the org chart, you have to drift and move upward. And so people that micromanage put their own career at risk because they're spending time in lower level tasks. They're not helping their boss out. And that's when I recommend to the CEO, and I do a lot of CEO coaching, you know what? That person doesn't want to get more strategic for whatever reason. You're not getting unloaded. You can't do the strategic things you need. Let's bring in a VP above them. And you know what? Maybe that person wasn't stepping up because they don't know how, because you're not a good teacher, because you've never been a real CIO and they've never been a CIO. And so they're acting like a VP of technology and they can't step up. Let's bring in a real CIO. And you know what? They may learn a lot. And then in their next career move, they'll get to be a CIO. But if you don't like what you're hearing from me there and you're like, no, I want to move up, that's why you might have to micromanage for a little while and then stop, get someone in who can grow in the job so you can grow in your job. I see some last calls for Q&A. We've got a couple of minutes still. I'm going to try to tackle one more here. Let's see. What's an effective way to help C-suite leaders or any leaders continue their learning activities and to share them with others? So here's the truth of it. A lot of us like to learn, but we get all this day-to-day activity and pressure that we have to manage. The only way I've seen it work is to create a process around learning. Maybe that's a monthly session where the leadership team all reads a book or a book summary and comes together. It could be that we measure what each person is doing for professional development, sometimes measured in hours. Many of our clients, everyone has to put in 3 hours a month on personal development. And at the monthly plan review, you put it in or not, and you get to share in 60 seconds or less, hey, here's what I did. Just that visibility, that peer pressure makes people put in a little bit more effort. And we have some programs for leaders that deliver content in a quick, approachable, regular way. But without the process, some people just won't keep developing. But with it and a little bit of a nudge, it's awesome to see new ideas and things coming in. So I'm going to stop talking here because I'm thinking, Brant, that you're going to want to stop talking here with a couple of minutes left to go. I want to say again that I'm happy to do short one-on-ones or even a full 90-minute session. No obligation. It's not a sales pitch. What I try to achieve there is to say, if you like some of the things you heard here, let me help you tailor them to your business so you can actually make tangible changes that add value. I'm going to stay online, but at this point, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brant, and I will fall silent.
That's awesome, Rob. Can you hear me? Just want to make sure we're back to audio together. All right. It sounds like Rob might have checked out. You can hear me. Wonderful. Great. Well, listen, I just want to thank everyone for attending. There was one of the questions that was asked earlier on about copies of the presentation. The answer is yes. Tomorrow, we will be sending out a link to the replay, a link to the presentation that has, the elements without the animation of Rob's presentation, as well as the workbook. And Rob, just so you know, Ari has come in and we will get information to him to reach out to you. I know that he's a CEO of a business up in Canada, and it looks like he wants to have a direct conversation. Any of you as well that would like to take Rob up on his generous offer to have a chat, please just email me directly. You've got that information, or put it into the chat box now, and we'll make sure that Rob gets that invitation. So we're coming up just on an hour. Rob, I want to thank you again for your time. Very helpful. We had a great turnout today, lots of good interaction. And once again, thank you for helping us building competencies for the mighty middle market.
You're welcome, Brent. Thank you for having me.
All right. With that, we'll sign off. And again, to everyone who's attended, we will get out that replay presentation deck as well as the workbook about 24 hours from now. All right. All the best. And Rob, we'll talk again soon.